Well, thanks for joining me on this sort of a different venue, different but related. We know the kind of economy that we have now, or we thought we used to have anyway. We don't really know what's going on now, but we do know that a lot of our creativity and finding ways of surviving and thriving during these uncertain times is right in front of us. So the more tools we have, um, here we have, you guys probably saw this before, but this was probably going on 10 years ago. And this is a book that I never did publish. I'll probably do it now. And I called it The Not So Empty Nest Syndrome. I Got You Through High School. Why Are You Still on My Couch? And we'll sort of flesh some of these ideas out in future classes. But I just want to share why I created this is when my kids were just out of high school and I was still cranking along trying to make the whole Note Queen thing work, right? But now with things that we have going on with the pandemic and the quarantine and the lockdowns and people losing their incomes, their businesses, all sorts of things where, maybe the cash that we're used to having coming in just isn't for a lot of people. So basically, so what I would name it now probably is the flexible home economy. It's much bigger than just, hey, your kids are out of high school and they're still living with you, or college. And then subtitle, Equitable Exchanges When Cash is Tight and Life is Weird. Because to me, life is kind of weird right now. So when things aren't the normal, where everybody's got their gainful employment and things are clicking along, and even when they are, these are some valuable ideas that you can adapt. Everyone can adapt to their own situation to just create more balance. So basically, all my little birdies, and you're going to see a few of these that my son created for me, like I said, about 8 to 10 years ago, somewhere like that. But basically, like, I was worn out. After 20 years of what I would consider extreme parenting, we were raising 4 awesome kids. I'm proud of all of them. They're compassionate, productive beings at this point in time. And at that point, it was 4 kids that were only a year apart or less. They were ranging from 19 to 22, and I guess I had the unexpressed expectation that when the last graduated from high school, I would sort of get, I get to clock out and have a break. We were kind of just sort of like, hey, man, we've been at this for a long time. That's 4 lunches and 4 breakfasts and 4 people in the tubby and 4 people at reading time and 4 people at sports and music and all this stuff. You guys know the drill. But in our case, they didn't leave the house afterwards. Unlike my generation, like my sisters and I, my brother, we were basically out of the house after high school, and I rarely went back, maybe one time between semesters of college. We were just gone. But 3 out of our 4 were spending a significant portion of their time at home in between their foreign adventures, which I was totally supportive of, random college classes, and I would call episodes of employment. Now, I know I always expected they would just go to college, and because we had our bachelor's degrees. All of their parents had bachelor's degrees at least, but we also understood that foreign travel was very important, and we would come back with stories for them about kids that we met all over the world. Then they're between 18 and 22, tons of cultures besides the US isn't so much on this, but tons of cultures just consider that you don't really have a complete education unless you spend a year or 2 traveling abroad. So we kind of came home with stories of that for them, and they got that bug. I would say 2 or 3 out of them have done fairly extensive foreign travel, speak some other languages, and that's really great. But none of them really had the college bug. Or were interested in things that required it. Like no one was going to be a science or something. They were more like artisan entrepreneur types. So I guess with all the college debt and things like that, it's not so bad, but it was kind of a crunch time there for us. And I was starting to be going a little bit crazy because at the time, my wife and I, at the time, we had had children with previous marriages, and we were both working hard. We were trying to build our businesses. We were just cranking and we were trying to pay off debt. We weren't exactly flush, didn't have a ton of expendable income. So the juxtaposition of watching our little fledgling adults, in the nest, sleep till noon and then get busy. Not all of them. There's one or two of them with Netflix, Facebook, iPhones. It was just driving us nuts. I was starting to relate to the Grinch where just all the noise in Whoville. I would be working in my home office in the garage, and I'd walk through the kitchen to the bathroom, and I would see one kid there and one kid there, and I was like going, oh my goodness. I was just starting to blow my top. Heart was 2 sizes too small, and I was afraid that with all of that built up, I might inadvertently blister my kids with all the resentment that I was brewing. And so one day I just, went back in the office, and instead of doing my regular note queen work or whatever I was doing at the time, combination of things, I created in one day this whole system that I'm going to share with you just as a launching point for your own creativity. And then at the same time, just to punctuate this sort of topic, there's my favorite Vietnamese gal down the street. She was doing my nails one day, and I was telling her about this, the system I had created, and she goes, oh, she told me about her friend who was just really working hard at her 9 to 5 plus a little bit of a part-time job, just scraping to keep a roof over her head. But that recently 2 of her 20-something kids had come back home, whether they were done with school or had been living with their father or something, but neither of them had jobs. So here she is, she's barely making it, working hard, and then her adult kids come home and they're not working. And she would take, so that they could have the car during the day, she would take the bus to work. Took it extra time, right? And then so they were entertained while they were at home. She paid for cable on an already stretched budget, and then she bought them iPads. I'm like, oh my goodness. Then when she would get home in the evening, you would think maybe the kids might have taken the car, gone to the store, buy groceries, maybe start cooking. Nope. She would come home, start cooking, so they would have something to eat. And then it's just like, was it any surprise she was weird to the bone? And so basically she was becoming a pretty apt little martyr. And so this kind of lopsidedness is really unhealthy. And it really does lead to a lot of distress and some people being worn out, other people not having even any self-respect and contributing to the system. So, I guess I put on here, the mother might start to understand why some species eat their young, or now take this with a grain of salt, please. She might pick up a chopstick and decide that shoving it through her head might feel good. When you got all that pressure, just let a little steam out, or she might develop cancer with all that repressed frustration that she was feeling. So I'm just going, wow. So not only am I feeling it, there's apparently a lot of people out there that have these similar sorts of imbalances. And just as a backstory, we grew up Mormon, and so we had something called Family Home Evening, FHE, and so I thought it was sort of funny that the flexible home economy, I sort of was glad that I could figure out an acronym that would sort of work. Now, Family Home Evening in the Mormon culture was something where once a week on Monday nights, you were expected to hold a little family meeting where we would have a lesson, learn some positive lesson, some spiritual concept or something like that, and we would sing a song and we would have a prayer, and we would have, and then we would play games, and then we would get to eat goodies. Like you could take turns saying, "Do you want brownies or Rice Krispie treats?" Something like that. So it was a really special thing that even though we were excommunicated from the church, but we kept a lot of our Mormon culture, and the music, and the spiritual guidance that we did in the home for our kids. So we actually spent so much time and energy just developing really sweet relationships with our kids. So, as I put here, after a lifetime of nurturing, loving, and creating an atmosphere of mutual respect and emotional safety, the last thing I wanted to do, I mean, that took a lot of years and a lot of effort. I didn't want to really ruin that return on investment, right? I didn't want to have to become, with my frustration, toxic in order to get them out of this cozy little nest that we had evidently created. I didn't want to have to trash these treasured relationships in order to push them out of the nest, but I wanted them to be forced to discover and rely upon their own strength and ingenuity, because I wanted them to know that they could do it, right? What we all want. And I knew I needed to turn up the heat, but I didn't want to burn them. After all, it'd be nice if they're around taking care of me at some point. Oh, goodness. So, anyway, you have probably seen this before, but I'll just come back to all healthy, successful relationships come down to two things: direct nurturing and clear boundaries. So we had done a lot of practicing of that at various points in their development. But it had gotten a little sloppy and different now that they were adults, but still living at home. So that's what I needed to do, is create more clear boundaries so I could still be nurturing. When you don't have clear boundaries, you have to keep people away from you, because if you get too close, they suck you in, and then you resent. Maybe you can be sucked into overgiving. Maybe some people don't have that proclivity, but that was something that was easy for me to do. So if I have good boundaries, though, I can stay close to people because I have good boundaries. I can, with very much loving, I can say, "I love you," and no. And I didn't have to say, "No, wow, how would you dare ask for that? I can't believe it. What a deadbeat, blah, blah, blah." I don't have to be mean and ruin the intimacy, but I could be very clear. So the more clear your boundaries are, the closer you can stay to people. And that was our experience. So other topics that I'm going to be covering briefly, not today really so much, but in the future, is certain things that we did in our home that really set us up for success all along. We had this thing ever since the kids were little called Reflection Bench. It was a very powerful way for them to learn excellent communication tools, basically how to listen. We also invested in their emotional intelligence. So like every night, we would ask them a series of questions of talking to each of them when we put them to bed, and so that they can understand and they can identify feelings. Sometimes some people just don't even know when they're mad or when they're sad or when they're scared. Some of us have grown up in such a way that we don't even know what our emotions are. And it's tough to be a good communicator and to work through things when you don't have emotional intelligence. We also took it through a Title VII program. If I think I'm remembering that right, there was a parenting class that the school was teaching when the kids were like in that kindergarten, first, second grade. We had an agenda that would live on the refrigerator so that we didn't want to hear whining all the time. They got a chance to write something that was bothering them on the agenda, knowing that every week it would be handled and brought up at the family meeting. So it wasn't incessantly, "Ma, ma, 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 ma." Okay, write it down on the agenda. We will bring it up at the family meeting. We had 10, 10, 10 a weekly allowance. I want to say that was based on Rich Dad Poor Dad's. Am I thinking? I wonder if that's right. Anyway, I'll go into that a little later. They learned a lot about financial planning and money management and being responsible. We didn't bail them out. We just would never bail them out. There was a little grace, but if they forgot their money, we wouldn't give them a loan to buy something at the store. So there's no whining about, mommy, mommy, I want that. Okay, did you bring your money? No. Or I forgot my lunch, or I forgot my homework. There's different things where we balanced compassion and clear boundaries, direct nurturing and clear boundaries. And besides that, they were expected to do chores. They weren't paid for that. Just being part of the family and living here, you need to do chores. So there's certain things that we had done since they were very little that really helped this program that I'm going to debut on this webinar. It helped it be successful. So basically, even without this pandemic that we have going on right now, college grads, they're often saddled with debt, which sounds like there may be broad spectrum forgiveness of college debt, higher education debt. That would be a great way to stop enslaving a whole generation of people, but they can't find gainful employment, in their field with their degree. And so they're basically stuck trying to compete for the kids who didn't go to college for those $10 or $15 an hour jobs, unless they're entrepreneurs, artist types. But now we have quarantine, we have lockdown. But in any case, there's a lot of ways besides the fact that college kids aren't being as productive or able to find the work that they need. But even so, it's like, hey, life is hard, whatever it is, whatever is showing up. It doesn't mean that, oh, poor you, I'm going to coddle a whole generation of kids. They've got to find a way to do something with their lives. In Lord of the Rings, I guess I'm kind of a geek in that way. It was one of my favorite movies. Frodo, he was considering the dark and daunting task ahead of him, and he bemoans, I guess he was the ring bearer or something, right? He says, I wish none of this had happened. And then Gandalf the wizard says, so do all who live to see such times, but that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to us. So it doesn't really matter which sort of challenge, we can always figure a way to get through it. And I think this is probably should be extrapolated, into the welfare system in some sort of compassionate and intelligent way. But most everyone is willing and should be asked to make a meaningful contribution. Almost everyone is absolutely capable of being assets instead of liabilities, regardless of how much cash they're able to bring in, because cash is only one way of exchanging value. In our culture, we're sort of trained to think that cash is it. If you're not making money, you're a loser. You can't contribute. And I've heard of a lot of people say people are doing bartering more these days because of the pandemic. And so that's a fabulous thing to think of. I'm always thinking, what do I have to trade? What skills do I have if my financial calculator isn't useful, what can I do? What can I give? So I'm thinking of that. And so I want to introduce the concept of time banking. I don't know if you've heard of that. We were introduced early on when in our community, and I'll suggest that you might want to look it up. I'm not going to go over it in depth right this minute. But the mission of time banks is to nurture and expand a movement that promotes equality and builds caring community economies through inclusive exchange of time and talent. So they have, assets. The tenets of time banking are everyone's an asset, everyone has something to give. They redefine what work is. There's a lot of work that needs to be honored. Reciprocity. Not how can I help you, but how can we help each other build the world we want to live in. Social networks, we all need each other. We're all a lot stronger together than apart. I remember there was a time when we really getting into prepping. Of course, being Mormon, we always had the have your 2 years supply sort of mentality, always be prepared. Um, but beyond that, I remember we were going, oh, well, if things get really weird and that zombie apocalypse happens, we got to be able to get our stuff and get out of town and what is it called, your bug out bag, and just get away from everyone. And someone we were taking a class from, he's the guy that I can't remember the name of the class, but he's the guy that caused us to turn our Southern California lawn into raised garden beds and fruit trees, and we ate out of that every day. Oh, I missed that garden so much. That's really the only thing I miss about being in California, to be honest. But is that garden that we had. But he says, don't be silly. You need people around you. You all need each other to survive. You need the dentist, the doctor, the mechanic, the farmer, you just need people. So it was he changed my thoughts about what it is to be, I don't know, self-sufficient or safe if there was social unrest or things like that. Luckily, during this time, I haven't seen much of any really bad, significant social degeneration so far, and I hope that continues, and respect. So basically, so I took the ideas of this time banking and then the financial ideas of creative financing and bartering and the parenting concepts that we had learned. And I created this whole system. There's actually 7 documents that go together in one system, and I'm just going to quickly introduce them right now. So basically, my thing to the kids was like, hey, if you here's what it costs to live here. And this is an interactive, has built-in functions that I created where we could enter a few numbers and boom, it would get spit out. So I'll go over each one of these a little more in depth as we go through the weeks if you want to engage. But I said, here's what it costs for us to live here and have this quality of life. If you like living here, then you need to start paying your fair share. And we have the constants, our mortgage, our rent, property taxes, our insurance, our utilities. Some of the things are fixed and some of them are flexible. And so basically the way I set up the system is that each person was incentivized to keep the expenses low. Turn off the lights so the electricity bill is lower. Turn down the heat, whatever. Don't leave the hose running, things like that. Or, don't waste money, don't waste food, all of those things. We had chickens at the time, I forgot that. Chickens in the backyard. Anyway, then I took how big is your room and then as a percentage of the overall, and then we have shared living space. And I also said basically driving a car is not a necessity. It's a privilege, and you need to pay for that. I don't feel like I need to, because you have 2 legs and you have a bicycle. So if you want to drive the car, you're going to pay for that. A phone is not a necessity. If you want a phone, then you're going to pay your portion of your phone. If you don't want it, fine. Things like that. And I was at the point where it was basically, sort of take it or leave it. And I really would have made him move out. And so it can't be an idle threat. You have to be, willing to lovingly set the boundaries of like, hey, I know you guys can figure out life. I don't think you're incompetent. You have another parent. You have family. You have friends. So anyway, this whole thing was just very easy to spit out every month. And then the basic, if they were going to school, because some of them were, and at times taking a lot of classes and at times not so much. So I had, how many hours are you spending in class? And I would comp them for that, right? That then they would take their cost of living, the numbers that have been generated on the last page, say the more classes you're taking, the less percentage of that you actually have to pay. And you can pay in dollars or you can pay in time or any combination of the two. So if they were making more money, if they had a job at the time and they were making more money than time, then they could just pay what they owed to me in dollars. If they didn't have a lot of money, then they could pay in time. And so I said, here's the things you can see. Here's the following tasks that qualify for your hours. Anything from, cooking, juicing, washing the car, painting the house, yard work, cleaning the house, washing the dog, helping grandma, helping us in our businesses, shopping, so on and so forth. Your hours are valued at this. Round your time up or down. If you carry a balance, there's a 10% fee. Anyone who is running behind for more than 2 months, our mitigation default, or cannot participate in the family meetings that are required for this to work, you'll need to make other arrangements. I said, really, you're adults. I trust you can survive in the world. Also, we gave them, I guess I called it sort of a mama care in a way, and that's not on here. I gave them rent credit for any of their, up to 50% of their out-of-pocket costs for tuition and books. And I did Omamacare instead of Obamacare for them, which was until they were 26, I want to say, that I would pay, I don't know, it was a big chunk of they still had to pay something, so that I knew if they went in or for anything that they were being judicious. Like, for instance, I had one daughter that she just didn't take good care of her teeth. And so, like, she was expensive at the dentist. So she was going to pay a percentage of that so that they had the cause and effect of their own decisions. Like, if they were responsible, then it cost them less money and or time, etc. You get the idea. And then basically, hey, this is just a work in progress. You can always make suggestions. And then each person had their own register where they kept track of how many, anyways, I'm going to go over there in detail, but just you can see it's very detailed and very well thought out so that they could keep track of what they owed and what they'd paid, and whether that was in time or dollars or some combination of the two. When they drove the car, so then there was these three others. They would have to keep track of the hours they spent in class, and they would have to keep track on the odometers because they were paying 25 cents per mile to drive the cars. And that was arranged at between the cost of gasoline and some prorated amount for the insurance and repair of the vehicle. And then we had a chore chart that is like, hey, you don't have to pay, we're not paying you, but because chores are just part of your living here and we don't want to be slobs. So then we just had a very precise way of trading up those concepts. And like I said, I did it just because I wanted to survive. It was just a really kind of, there was a lot of pressure, at that certain time. And, but then every time someone would come to the house, I had people, they would just be glued to the fridge looking, they go, what is this whole thing? Literally, I came in and 7 pieces of paper took up almost the whole fridge. People would come in, they'd be so fascinated. And they would be going like, oh my God, this is the most amazing thing I've seen, or my brother needs this, or my mother wouldn't be in this miserable situation if she could implement this, blah, blah, blah. So I just thought, hey, I'm going to just put it out there and kind of share it. And now that we have the pandemic, we just need, lots of different ways of stacking it up. So anyway, you guys know that I'm always creating financial solutions, just one mom and pop to another. This is just another way to apply that concept. Obviously, in our own homes, it's even more local, organic, free range, and non GMO than even owner financing, right? So, anyway, and the idea of that, we're all in this together and we support each other with time, money, resources, emotional support. There's a lot of things that should be valued in some way. With time banking, it was like an hour from the gardener was equal to the hour from the attorney. Everybody's time was worth one widget, one unit. And so, it's a way of saying no matter what, hopefully you're doing what you love, because what you add to the community isn't more valuable than what someone else adds. So it was a really interesting mind stretch into a different way of thinking about it. Is there any questions or comments related to this? I would love to hear if anyone has thoughts, reactions, questions. If not, we'll kind of just edit this to this point and then just talk about, hey, what else is going on in the world?
Hey, Don, I'd like to ask a question.
Yeah.
So, well, what I gather is that you developed this when the kids were older, and I'm just kind of curious if you thought about how you would adapt it to start, when the kids are younger. Like if you don't have a system at all, or your system is not as, detailed.
Right.
What suggestions would you have for someone starting like me? Right now, my two kids are in middle school.
Yeah, so this system is really for basically adults or anyone that I would consider should be kind of on their own or contributing. So what age that, to me, the age was like clearly after high school, maybe even before if they're not, I don't know what is going on in their life, but any adult in my mind should be able to find some way. Now, when they were younger, we had a lot of things that were expecting them to be very self-sufficient. They had their chores. They all did their own laundry from when they were 8 years old. They had to learn communication. Oh my goodness, did they hate that reflection bench? But then they loved it later, right? But wow, when they were kids, did they hate that? Because when they would get in an argument, it's not like ever someone got punished, so to speak, or whatever, but two people would have to sit on the bench. Literally, it was like, I think it was a piano bench, an old piano bench that we put over in the corner. They had to sit there until they could. So, anyway, I'm not going to go into that now, but it helped them to learn how to, see their part in everything and hear and reflect the other person, take ownership of their own activities. With the allowance thing, I think that was, if I say I did a couple things good as a parent, we did really well at teaching them about money management, and we didn't bail them out. We would not bail them out. And if they got in trouble for something, I was ready one time to to let my son get arrested because he'd done some stupid thing. And I don't know who. Axel, can you get that from whoever's got noise in the background? But anyway, we wouldn't bail them out. If they got in trouble for something, we let them have the full consequences, and we expected them to contribute. So when they were younger, it was them doing their money management. They had to give 10% to charity. They got a certain amount. I think it was like $1 per week for every age, for their age. So if they were 10 years old, they got $10 a week. Had nothing to do with chores. Chores are just because you need to contribute. Everybody just needs to do this. It's part of being a human living in this space. But like they had to give, let's say out of that $10, $1 had to go to charity of their choice. The other one had to go towards college, saving for higher education. And the last dollar had to go to some long-term investments. And then they were free to spend that last $7 any way that they wanted. And we did not buy them things other than birthdays and Christmas. They were expected, if they wanted something, that they would save up for it, and we just didn't budge on that. And then it was they got to see how it was to blow all their money on candy the next, the same day, and they got chances to practice with what it was like to save for like a bicycle. Or my one daughter, she saved up and got a treadmill, even like it. She was young and she bought herself a treadmill for $1,500. Yeah, so but yeah, there's the things you do early on, it sure makes it easier later in life. I mean, I have people that I love very much, but I would they kids that haven't have been a little bit spoiled, they're pretty tough to rein in once they're older. But it sounds to me like I would love to be able to hear more of what you do as part of this when we have a better connection. But anyway, well, that's kind of just all I have for now. This is just kind of a fun pet project, and appreciate you guys showing up to it.